All right, we're going to get started. Thank you all for being with us. Washington, D.C. has a terrible reputation for those of you who are not from Washington, D.C. If you have a panel, all morning and then have a lunch and then another panel, your attrition rate is about 90%. So the fact that we've lost that riffraff of 40% is a good sign. And thank you all for hanging in there, because this is going to be delightful to hear from two public servants on the front lines involved in this whole issue of implementation of criminal procedure reform. And we are delighted to have with us Attorney General Catherine Cortez Masto. Honorable Catherine Cortez Masto is the Attorney General of the state of Nevada. Prior to her service at the Attorney General's office, she worked as the Assistant County Manager for Clark County, Nevada. She also served as a federal criminal prosecutor for the United States Attorney's Office in Washington, D.C., and was Chief of Staff for Governor Bob Miller. Attorney General Masto is a native Nevadan. She attended the University of Nevada, Reno, graduating with a Bachelor of Science degree in 1986 with a major in finance. She graduated cum laude from Gonzaga University School of Law in Spokane, Washington in 1990. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you are also now the president of the chair of the Conference of Western Attorneys General. And as the chair of that conference, you, part of your prerogative, I guess, is to have an initiative, a priority. Correct. And your priority is working with the international community and Mexico in particular. Is that correct?
Particularly on transnational crime.
Transnational crime. So thank you for joining us, and we'll invite you to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just say what a fantastic morning this has been. Very informative for me. So thank you very much for the privilege to be here, the invitation to the Institute. And as well as, let me just highlight, here's what I'm going to do. I want to, most people don't even know what the attorneys general in Nevada or in the state, United States do. So I'm going to give you just a quick rundown of what we do, but more importantly, why we have this Conference of Western Attorneys General, and then what brought us to our partnership with Mexico. One of the key things, however, with respect to our relationship with Mexico that is a little housekeeping I want to get out right away is we receive funding from the federal government for this partnership to help support this partnership. And I know some of our funders are here from the State Department. Actually, I believe they're via the internet right now, the webcast, State Department, INL, the Mexican Embassy. And I just want to give them a big thank you for the vision on the rule of law in Mexico and funding programs like ours to help us in the continued outreach with our partners. So let's get started. We are, okay, let's not get started.
Right?
Yep, it's not going. Is this on? I'll let you,
Here's the clicker.
Yeah, I'm looking for the thing that jumped.
oh, it's the flash drives. You need a flash drive.
But it's loaded there.
Yeah, but you have to have.
You need the flash drive.
Oh, you need to drive in.
Control it. So here, let me just do it manually.
Can you do it manually?
Uh-huh.
Oh, now it has to be.
Okay, wait a minute. Okay, it's almost like state work. Okay, so we're going to go through some of this really quickly. This is the Conference of Western Attorneys General. Attorneys General, they're in the United States, they're the top law enforcement officers of their state. So they handle so many things on the representation of the state of Nevada, but most importantly, they also work with the district attorneys who represent the local counties, and they work with all of the sheriffs and chiefs. Some of us have actual, not only prosecutors in our office, but investigators as well. Some of us are primarily the DAs for our state. So there's a gamut of what we do, but our primary jurisdiction really is the representation and protecting the citizens of our state. And so that's what we do. In the western United States, there are issues that are common to some of our states that we as attorneys general have come together to address. And some of those issues that we are looking at include the areas of water, wildlife, grazing. You'll see environmental protection, Native American law. So that has drawn some attorneys general together to create this conference of Western attorneys general. And you will see on the western states there's about 18 of us that have come together that have created this alliance of Western attorneys general. As you can also see, there are some states that are not necessarily Western states, but are associate members because they get a benefit of the collaboration on some of the issues that we talk about. Key for all of us attorneys general is that collaboration and coordination on best practices. And that's what it's about. So that can help us with our tools and our enforcement and protecting the citizens of our state. And that's key for us. And that is exactly why we are drawn to Mexico. Many of the issues we deal with, from human trafficking to drug trafficking to money laundering to weapons trafficking to internet safety of children, those are issues that we find now as attorneys general that are crossing our borders. They're not just contained within our states. So it required us to start working with our other peers in the other states. But we found now that, particularly for the border states of the United States, a lot of what the crime we were seeing was also bleeding into Mexico and also bleeding from Mexico into the United States. So one of the areas we started focusing on with the help of the USAID was reaching out to our peers in Mexico. And that's literally what started the relationship with our Mexican counterparts, the attorneys general of the states in Mexico. And we literally came together to collaborate on those areas that I just talked about, which were the human trafficking, drug trafficking, the money laundering, the weapons trafficking. In fact, in 2007 and 2008, for the first time, the state of Nevada actually filed MOUs with 3 Mexican states, Chihuahua, Oaxaca, and Baja, to collaborate on working together on those issues, to collaborate on investigations and sharing information, and most importantly, to collaborate on training and sharing best practices. And that has spurred many of the other states, particularly the other western states from New Mexico to, believe it or not, Idaho. They also have counterpart states that they have entered into MOUs with. So for our purposes, we've learned that to get things done, to help protect the citizens of our state, we need to build network and relationships with peers, because the crime we are seeing is crossing the border, and to go after those individuals, we need help. And so that was a natural alliance right here, was with our Mexican counterparts. When we started the relationship with the Mexican counterparts, the attorneys general, the story they told to us was compelling. And what I mean by that is, if you're a law enforcement officer in a state and your responsibility is for the protection of the people of your state, it's one thing to get up in the morning and go to work knowing that you're safe, your family's safe, but you're going to go after the bad guys in your state, and there's not really going to be a consequence to you. That's not so when it came to our counterparts. We were hearing horrific stories from them about not only trying to protect their citizens and hold the perpetrators accountable, but protecting themselves, protecting the people that work in their offices, protecting their families. Literally, when we started to do the training, my counterpart in New Mexico, his name is Gary King, he's the Attorney General there, and he was one of the first, New Mexico was one of the first to enter into a relationship with Chihuahua. And he started training because the Attorney General from Chihuahua asked, listen, we need some training on prosecutorial conduct, how to prosecute, how to investigate, how to forensically investigate, what's the role of the judges, can you give us training? He brought a number of the folks from the Attorney General's office from Chihuahua to New Mexico, trained them, they went out there, trained them. And he was just talking with the Attorney General of Chihuahua, saying, how's the training going, how was everything? And she said, we want to come back again. We want more training. And he said, jokingly, he's thinking, well, we just trained everybody. What more, what other training do you need? And she looked at him and said, well, they're all dead now. They're all dead now, and I have new folks coming in, and they need to be trained. And so when you're talking to your peers and we realize the severity of the situation, that really was a call to arms for us to really reach out, to develop this relationship and work collaboratively with them. We look at them, quite frankly, as it should be. They're our peers. They're another law enforcement agency that can help us protect all our citizens across the border, and we need to share tools, enforcement tools, best practices, and how we work together. And so that's what you see moving through this process. This started in 2007, 2008. But part of what we are seeing here, and let me just, these are maps that I brought with me that we use for our new AGs when they come in, but kind of tells a story as to why the relationship was so important. Mexican drug cartels extending far beyond the border. I don't know if you can see this map. This shows a map of the United States, Mexico, and the little dots are where the Mexican drug cartels are reaching into our states. Along with that, you will see the drug transportation corridors through the United States, impacting every state in the United States. You will also see here, this is the street gang involvement in drug distribution. What is this? These are the domestic gangs. These are the gangs that are the United States citizens that exist in every one of our states. And we know, after being on the streets, working with our law enforcement, that what we are seeing is that through our domestic gangs, the Mexican cartels are infiltrating to continue their trade. There's more money, there's more product that the local domesticated gangs can sell on the streets, and with the collaboration of the Mexican cartels, it's that much more of a business. Here's what happens when we see this type of activity, this organized crime. It's like, I hate to say it, it's like any business. They're gonna peddle whatever crime that pays the most amount of money. And they're going to move it, whether it's drugs, and depending on the type of drugs, methamphetamine, heroin, cocaine, or whether it's human trafficking, because now that pays more money with less costs associated, less penalties associated with it, or any type of crime. So that's what we see. And what we need as law enforcement is the ability, the tools to go after them, the ability to gather the data that's necessary to identify it, the ability to investigate and prosecute, but most importantly, the ability to work together. And so that's what a lot of the AGs recognize, that there was a nexus beyond just the border states in Mexico of what was happening in our individual states. This is the gun trafficking, illegal guns that you see in the United States. Along with that is the human trafficking, pockets of human trafficking. You will see there in Nevada, I don't have a pointer, so here is Southern Nevada, that's Las Vegas.
The pointer does work.
Oh, it does work. Perfect. That is Las Vegas, Nevada. Las Vegas has casinos. Las Vegas is a big convention tourism. There is a strong, large human trafficking component. And what I mean by that is sex trafficking of minors. The route that they take, whether they're coming from Mexico, is through Southern California to Las Vegas, up to Reno area here, over back into Sacramento and California. That requires me not only to work with my peer, Kamala Harris, who's the Attorney General of California, but again, our peer, our wonderful friend here in Baja, Mexico. And so those are the relationships that are necessary, important, that we've developed for that reason. So what are we doing to address this issue? And this really comes down to the alliance partnership, which was created with Mexico. And what we realized, besides the crimes that we all can work together to address, what Mexico was going through and what you've all talked about today was reform of the rule of law. And they were coming to us as peers, as partners, saying we need training. We want training to help us with this new system that we are entering into, and to train our investigators forensically. How do you investigate a crime? What's the forensically, how do you do it? And then how do you take that investigation and give it to a prosecutor to prosecute that investigation? And then what's the next process in that system? Let me just say one thing, and I agree with everything that's said here. When we talk about a criminal justice system, it's a system just that. And what I mean by that is every player is important, from defense counsel to the prosecutor to the investigators to the judges. It's a system for a reason because it has to work as a system. No person, no individual in player is mutually exclusive of the other. And for that reason, they all need the same level of training, the same level of funding to support that system. So when we started our training with our peers in Mexico, that's the type of training we provided, that holistic training. Not only to the investigators, not just to the prosecutors, but to the investigators, to the judges, forensically, how do you handle this? And so the first training that I had was in Las Vegas. And we had a number of, at least 50 investigators and prosecutors that came from Mexico. They came to the School of Law, Boyd School of Law in Las Vegas, and we had a 2-day training for the investigators. They were not only my attorneys, my prosecutors, and my investigators, but what I did is I pulled in Southern Nevada, our law enforcement, our public defender's office, our district attorney's office. We had a wide variety of folks that came in to train. And it was a successful training, and I'll tell you how I know why. One of my prosecutors was there. We're in Las Vegas, casinos right on the Strip. And it was right just before noon. They ended early, like at 11 o'clock. And so my prosecutor, she said to them, we're early. She assumed that they'd want to go get some lunch, go out on the Strip, check it out, and give you some free time. And they all turned to her and said, no, we want to do it again. We want to go through that course again. We want to do the moot courtroom again. We want to do it again. They were serious about learning what they needed to do to take back to Mexico. And so for that reason, this has been a serious project. I don't even want to say it's a project. This has been a serious friendship that we have had with our peers to help them through this process. You will see here a lot of the focus and really that we talk about here when we're doing training is the binational exchanges as well as the training. And I want to just kind of talk a little bit about the specifics as to each. And excuse me, I'm going to read a little bit here because there's so much to what we do as part of CWAG. But the CWAG Alliance Partnership's binational attorneys general exchanges help establish, maintain, and strengthen cooperation among state attorneys general's offices in Mexico and the United States, especially northern Mexico and the western United States. Although we believe in bringing together all stakeholders regardless of geography, as I've stated. By hosting exchanges and trainings throughout the United States, CWAG extends the reach of its programming beyond the border region. We cultivate existing border relationships with public and private entities, including the Border Governors Conference, the Border Security Work Table, Border Attorneys General, and the Southwest Border Alliance. Our partnership brings existing relationships and a specialized training curriculum on money laundering, human trafficking, weapons smuggling trainings to relevant agencies along the border. We use these relationships to identify key personnel within the Border Attorneys General's offices who investigate and prosecute crimes within the United States. The Alliance partnership further supports and encourages robust communication among U.S. and Mexican state attorneys general. We have a website that provides a point of contact for all entities involved in its programs and acts as a repository for training and reference materials. A regularly published electronic newsletter provides inexpensive yet wide-reaching communications to all entities and past participants of our programming, and online training courses provide practical focused training on subjects of particular interest to successful oral prosecutions, including the emerging topic of using DNA in prosecutions in Mexico. Our partnership's oral advocacy training program seeks to improve the ability of the Mexican states to successfully prosecute transborder crime. The training includes basic oral advocacy designed to introduce Mexican prosecutors to the process of presenting cases orally rather than in writing. With a focus on learning by doing, the course includes lecture and practice in case theory, opening statements and closing arguments, direct and cross-examination of witnesses, and introduction of exhibits. Team trainings allow the CWAG Partnership Alliance to bring instructors from our many and wide-reaching associations together with their Mexican counterparts to explore the process of building a case for an oral trial. Not only do we provide the trainings, we provide mock trials, moot courts, you name it. We want to give them the full exposure to the process, whatever they seek in their abilities, what they need to move forward. So the practical consequences of that are obvious. But let me tell you a couple of others. And this is why the relationship with our peers is so important. Because we've built this relationship, it has helped us as AGs in the United States protect our citizens. And it has brought model practices both sides of the border. So for instance, Rhode Island, which is on the eastern side of the state, because they're a part of this alliance, there was a triple homicide in Mexico, and the Mexican nationals fled to Rhode Island. Because the AG of that state in Mexico knew and was part of our alliance, he contacted the AG in Rhode Island. They worked together to extradite those individuals back to Mexico. The same thing just happened in Colorado. Nuevo Leon, this time it was reverse. Mexican nationals in Colorado commit a murder, flee across the border. Because of the relationship, we reached out to our peer in that state, and their individuals were extradited. Same thing with Amber Alert. I don't know if anybody's familiar. There's an Amber Alert program. When we have a missing child in the United States, it's a national program that's called Amber Alert. An alert will go out across the airwaves through internet technology to identify that this child is missing, and oftentimes the license plate, the vehicle description, so you can track down this child. Because of the relationship that Utah has with Baja, for the first time I understand, the Amber Alert program has been implemented in Baja California. So these are best practices that we share, and we will continue to do so. A lot of the funding, yes, $2 million a year comes from the federal government, and thank you so much. But there is so much more that we as AGs and our offices put into this as well. We have our attorneys training. We have our attorneys involved in traveling when necessary. We invite the attorneys general to our conferences in the United States. We've been to Cuernavaca, to the attorneys general's conferences there. So there is this binational exchange, and we will continue that dialogue. And then one final thing. Because of this relationship, and money laundering is one of the issues that we are going to be talking about here in the end of January as part of our transnational crimes program. Because of this relationship, as many people know, in Las Vegas we have a number of casinos. My concern has always been, and many of the people in Nevada, is the money laundering through the casinos. Well, Mexico, concerned about money laundering in its casinos, wanted to reach out and talk to somebody about what we do to address this issue, what our rule of law looks like in the state of Nevada. So because of this relationship, I was able to host, it was at the fall of last year, Jose Alberto Balbuena, who's the head of the Financial Intelligence Unit in Mexico, the Ministry of Treasury. He literally came out with his staff, sat down not only with my team, but our Gaming Control Board investigators, our Gaming Commission folks, and learned what our law was, how we issued or how we protected against money laundering issues, and then took that information back to Mexico to help him do his job, hopefully in implementing anti-money laundering areas. So for us, the partnership has been instrumental in helping us impact and address transnational crime. But more importantly, it's brought new friends to our family. And so it's been a fantastic partnership, and it will continue in the future. Thank you so much for the opportunity to allow us to talk about it.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Great. Thank you. Now we'll hear from Licenciado Romel Moreno Manjares, who is the Procurador del Estado de Baja California, the Attorney General of the State of Baja California. He was appointed by the Governor of Baja California as Procurador del Estado on November 21st, 2007. Since then, the Procurador has been at the forefront in combating the state's crime and violence. And if you know anything about the history of crime and violence in Mexico over the last 6 years, you know that Baja California, especially Tijuana, were ground zero for especially the early years, 2008, 2009, 2010. So he lived through some of the most difficult times in the state's history confronting organized crime. Before his appointment as Attorney General, he was the General Controller of the Federal Police and the Chief of Staff of the Federal Assistant Attorney General in Mexico City. Mr. Moreno has served as Chief Legal Advisor for cases of murdered women in Ciudad Juarez, something that impacted people not only in Mexico but here in the United States as well in the late 90s and early 2000s. He holds a law degree from the University of Baja California and 2 certifications, one in criminal law from Salamantina University in Spain, and the second in intelligence and security at LSD University in Israel. Mr. Moreno also was a law professor at the University of Baja California and CETIS University. It's been my pleasure to know the Procurador since 2010 when we paid him a visit in Tijuana and see him and his team in action in that state, not only, as we said, combating fierce violence and organized crime, but trying to implement a profound reform of state criminal procedure. I think I said one time it's like trying to run the Kentucky Derby while saddling your horse all at the same time. And it's a really, really complicated and difficult task, and I just congratulate you for such a fine job, and we're really honored that you're here with us today. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Quisiera iniciar primero con el agradecimiento a todos y cada uno de ustedes porque llegar a este escenario es muy gratificante, particularmente porque encuentro en contexto 5 años de experiencia, 5 años de trabajo conjunto, en donde no quisiera dejar de mencionar a tanta gente que ha hecho posible que hoy en este país, en México, tengamos una palabra que me parece que tenemos que estar todo el tiempo planteando, que es la esperanza. Porque hablar de esperanza es más allá de la ley de amparo, hablar de esperanza es más allá de hablar de los recursos económicos, hablar de esperanza.
Economic resources, talk about hope is about the capacity of the police, the structure of the prosecutor's office, the ministers, the justices of the Supreme Court. But today we have to take away this burden on the and on the citizens and the difficulties for the operators of the system. And I'm going to use these 15 minutes. The first part of it, I'm going to talk about the something that goes countercurrent. Because to talk about a system where there's a proposed reform in the country, we'd have to look at the implementation and everything. So I think with the first thing we have to do is 2 years ago, I had an opportunity to meet with the visionary people from this institute to talk about organized crime. Tijuana had become not a model, but in something that had to be reviewed with regard to how we brought down high impact crime. Now, within our group of attorneys generals, we have a very diverse realities in the different countries. It's not the same in the northern border region than in the south. So therefore, our experience was worse than Juarez with regard to kidnappings, abductions. We were above the levels. And when we talk about this, we said today, independently of Article 21 of the Constitution, talks about the Office of the Prosecutor's Office, the more responsible for prosecuting crimes. We had all of these kidnappings. This is part of history. But let's talk about how we did this, made this effort. It was with teamwork is how we overcame this. In my country, we don't work in teams normally. It seems that everybody has a different point of view. We have academia with great capacity to be able to contribute a lot. And then we have the operators of justice as well. And then we also have the pro-reform people and others who don't want to change, who say, well, we're fine the way we are. And so what I'm going to submit to your consideration, and why, and I want to stress that we have every day, our view is that from the person of running the Attorney General's office, and Felipe Borrego, not long ago in Nuevo León, he said that the burden or the responsibility of the system is very much has to do with the office, the attorney generals. We don't have it has a lot to do. There's no career. It's usually a prosecutors for 1 or 2 years. I'm the longest standing one. Of 5 years, I've been the office of the attorney general because they've all been run out since they come in because there's a challenge. And they see that the system doesn't work, and therefore they say it doesn't work, and that's why they don't stay in. And so the example is like a soccer team, and the coach is so bad that you have to take the coach out every 2 seconds. So how are you going to how to make the coach work and the team work so that to be able to achieve goals? Let me say, give you a couple of ideas, give you a couple of thoughts in 10 minutes to talk about this specific reform as it relates to court. Now, I want to tell you that the experience of the Attorney General's offices or state governments, the first thing, so we have to talk about jurisdiction. Who's responsible for this homicide? Is it the Federation or the states? And the people don't care who is responsible, who has jurisdiction. All the people care about, they see murders in their house, at home. When we talk about kidnappings, who's responsible for these? Is it the federal government or the state government? In my experience, there's a lot of my colleagues who said they've decided to break with relationships with the federation, not institutional relations, but with regard to responsibility or jurisdiction. What we did was independently of whose job it was, it was more important to work together because the citizens were demanding that we do something about this. So this led to bringing down the numbers of execution and auto theft because the drug traffickers started to branch out into other things, not only drugs but other crimes. And so this shows. And so those of us who were responsible for common crimes, we had to be responsible for the whole chain of crimes with a pre-established budget available to us. I'm going to tell you about our experience, how we implemented the adolescent system from 2005 to 2007. We implemented a juvenile justice. You know what's absent? What's absent in the system now? The Federation, the federal government. Number 2, in August, we took on the responsibility of the states of 80%. What nobody talks about right now, but we have to stress right now, is what we call micro sales of drugs. I mean, retail drug sales, street sales. So within the implementation of this system, there's a dynamic of implementing, in other words, juvenile justice. We do this and we talk about this retail drug traffic or street drug traffic, and all they talk about is the budget, the enthusiasm, and that's all we talk about. Then we have the new system that's coming in right now, and we obviously we face a big challenge as well because up to this point in time, we've been receiving information 11 states of the Federation, and the federal government has been absent. What do I trying to talk about here? I'm saying that there's a huge need right now in our country to include all voices, to make all voices heard. And so this session is great. It's very special because Alejandro is connected by cable. Alejandro Ponce just spoke from MCA. From the Conference of Attorneys Generals. We're in the middle of an ocean, and all of a sudden we have to implement a reform. Nobody's thinking about the reform. What we're thinking, we are determined to become credible to the citizens. And the people in our community say that the very people who are doing the kidnapping are in the Attorney General's office. That's what the people say. How can we change this perception? How can we improve? We got to improve salaries. We have to improve the prosecutors' career and everything. This is what we've been talking about for years. So therefore, we think that to implement this reform, what you have to do is have to be liked by everybody. Because when I was talking about in 2007, when I talked to a lot of my colleagues, there was panic. And most of us who are in charge of these duties, because it's better to just leave things the way they are and not do anything. So a lot of this implementation process, at least in Latin America, started the other way around. And so they talk about what? They have a reform. They do a lot with the judges, with the defense attorneys, with the prosecutors, and with the police officers, which we have to mention, who are the last one who are taken into account. The police who are very grateful. And here together with me is the Director of Municipal Public Security of Mexicali. And you must say, oh, it's nice that he's up here. But let me tell you, that what's so valuable about what he does is he works for a party in Mexico, whether we like it or not. He belongs to the PRI, and I'm in a government that's in the PON government. It's part of the under the PON government. I wish that everybody had the same will to be serving the people in justice as the Constitution says, but that's not the way it is down on the front line. So you have to look at the short, medium, and long term. And it seems to me what's very, very significant is that Marco's here with me, has traveled here with me, because we've understood that only together we'll be able to work to improve everything. And I'm convinced of the support that was provided to us in the most difficult moment by the MSI, particularly the Conference of Attorneys Generals. And particularly, I say this because we're facing this challenge. We didn't know how to start. All we had was a code. We had the political will, but we didn't have technically the tools available to us, because the attorneys, we always have a clear idea about the law, but we don't know anything, and we can't even imagine how to work on a service and in organizing the agency. And so the most wise advice was to invite experts, as they did in Chile. I think this was a solution that our offices, one way or another, we have engineers, prosecutors, and even Burger King, everybody. We're asking advice from people, anybody, how to provide service, to learn how to provide service. How can an attorney, nobody thought about it. It wasn't in the script for an attorney, a prosecutor, to have to be polite. You know, they thought it was only for the victims. They didn't realize that it has to be. So it's a problem. We have to include psychologists as well to change this whole view of things. So what's helping us is to other points of view had to be taken into account. So this was never done before, and so I'm very grateful, therefore, to Mr. Canales, because I believe this reform has to start the other way around. First, we have to explain to the citizens that there was a reform. And then people don't even have the foggiest idea about even the traditional, the previous system. So how can we start talking about a master's program in the adversarial system? And I like these two messages that were just mentioned. So there's a contradiction. On the one hand, we're talking about the Mexican state and its strength, how strong it is, and the need for these exceptions. How can we talk about how to prosecute, how to bring forth a case in an oral trial, and like in Chihuahua, how to generate these lines of action to be able to protect witness particularly to what extent, how can we protect victims, no matter how adversarial the system, or whether it's a traditional system. We have to have this backing. All these things have to be. So there's three very clear things we have to have: is take care of the babies from the time it's born. And therefore, we're not prepared in Mexico for organized crime, for this retail drug sales, street drug sales, and the experiences that we've had in oversight and internal affairs when we want to investigate a crime committed by a public official. What happens is that the witnesses become very frightened. We have no witnesses to be able to prosecute this. We don't have it. We're unable to in oral trials. We just can't deal with this. This is a very interesting experience, because one of the first cases that we had was precisely because we were supported in precautionary measures that were issued, protective measures. Nobody bond. When somebody was released on bond, so the defendant didn't appear because he was out on bond. But we had everybody there, the judge and everybody. We trusted that the defendant was going to come, but he was released on bail, and this sort of helped us a lot. And so these pretrial services we created, we're Morelos and us, we're the only ones that have this pretrial service component that's been created. And so this is very quickly, I want to share some ideas. This is our justice center. Criminal Justice Centers. It's comprehensive. We have both the hearing rooms. This is the court as well, and we designed all this based on international models, and so we included the hearing rooms. This is the courthouse. It says we have the office of the Attorney General, the Public Defender's Office. So it's an integrated comprehensive centers. So this is when we talk about how we begin the reform. We realize we have to reorganize everything. This is what we're doing. We have to change our entire methodology. We have to change the capacities and skill sets. We're talking about how many crimes were committed in a year. So in the future we have an idea. I'm going to not only get into be focused only on oral trials, but we have to discuss the volume of cases and how to deal with it, how to cope with it. This is very significant, because we have to have this idea, this vision for the big in Chile, the parallel reform they call it in Chile. And if we're not aware of what our indicators are, how our indicators with regard to efficiency and effectiveness, then we can't get into implementation yet. So we're experiencing things in Chiapas in different ways. it's very gradual. Are we going to do it gradually or by crime? In Nuevo León, for example, there's a lot of different systems and arrangements. So we have to thinking about the traditional system, the new ones, retail sales, the trafficking in persons, etc. The media starts to question you. What results can you show us right now? What about in trafficking in persons, what can do? And so we start to say, what resources we have? Well, the resources we had before is what we have. We don't have any new resources. And so we have to look at our budget, because beyond the enthusiasm that we had in the last years, justice has been set aside, and we've been emphasizing security instead of justice, particularly defense, the Navy, but not justice hasn't been. So what's happened at the federal level and the state level? We have a lot of people that would appear on TV as being arrested, but we had a lot of problems with regard to disposing of the cases and adjudicating the cases and completing this adjudication. So this is the design of the implementation. How an agency should be structured or built, and how should the dynamic of the forensic medicine, it's a little bit like the CSIE section, but this helps a lot of people, and I try to explain to CSI, they've seen, this is how I save myself from explaining everything, because CSI they've seen on TV, because it's cultural. The people realize what the prosecutor does. When they see us, they think I'm going to pull out a pistol, because they didn't understand yet that we have to engage in this change of culture process, because security is one thing and justice is another. We have to put into context what justice is, that security is one thing, and so this is very ethereal, because in Latin America we're not in the habit of measuring. Every time we're asked to measure and to come up with statistics, and furthermore, it seems that we have we have a lot of moot court, for example, moot courts. A lot things are criticized a lot, but there is the practice of preventive detention before bringing somebody before a judge. A lot of people would criticize this, but this comes from before. So there's been a proposal in criminal that we've changed the paradigm, how to and conflict resolution, and not just doing things the way they were done in the past. Now, here's the structure. In Mexico, we've been working very hard in Baja California in parallel reform. What do I mean by parallel reform? This is sort of a management issue. This is what we're talking about. The management side is to take very much into account the information reporting system evaluation. The first year we had nothing, zero. It's embarrassing to say that we have nothing. But in prevention, we didn't have anything either. The whole system's at zero, so it's okay. We're not. So it's good that we're starting now. We realize we have to change, because everything's at zero, and so we're sort of like, it's like jumping like a child. We can jump higher and higher and higher like a child as we grow. So people, from the very beginning, we know what we have, and we can't lose heart at the very beginning. So the detractors of the system, it's a problem. What it is, it's a problem of the system. From the very beginning, the media went and said, the system has failed. The question was, why did the system fail? Because there's no oral trial. But the oral trial can't be till 8 or 9 months later, and so it's very important to redirect our efforts, and not only just train for oral trials, but all in the earlier stages to the trial, because we have to do these things hand in hand with the municipal police, because those who are detained in flagrante, they're the ones who conduct these in flagrante arrests, and so therefore the investigations we've received support also from the Western Attorney General's Conference, and prosecutors, attorneys general come from all over to help us, and millions of dollars have been used for this. And so what was all this? A lot of my colleagues it's very hard for them. It's very difficult for them to do the vetting process. But if people come and after see that it's possible to bring down the high impact crimes, then it fuels the dream, and we can see that we can have a reform, and we can at least have a incentive to do this. This is what I want to bring up to you just quickly, so not to get so far into the weeds, but I want to talk a bit about this. What we're talking about is the surface of justice. If we talk about the service of justice service, so we have to talk about educational service, health service. It's all a service, so there's got to be indicators, efficiency and effectiveness. This is absolutely fundamental. And now we have the 2008 reform, and how we have to sort of re-engineer everything, change the whole office around. For even myself, I have to start not like sort of like a manager of an organization. How I have to decide what this employee does, what this employee does. How do you coordinate it all? And this will requires a lot of patience and humility to be able to do this. We have to be humble to do this, to act as a manager, because I was trained as one of my colleagues as attorneys in the old school. That's how I was trained, the old school. But when we talk about results, I have to look at exactly what is being requested or called, what I'm being called upon to do. Here are the processes. We talk about substantive, strategic processes. I'm not going to go too delve deep into this. The only thing I want to say is that we have to separate the traditional system. In other words, how long is it going to take? All the cases under the traditional system are going to be over 5 years. The note in the news in Mexico, it says is that we're about to finish all these cases. There's only 5,000 cases left from the traditional systems. We're going to submit to the consideration of the critics to evaluate what they're supposed to evaluate, because that's part of the transparency process. So now, this is an issue of reform and has to do with the review of manuals, planning, execution, measuring. But what's in the center is the citizen. It's centered around the citizen. The design wasn't for the operators of justice. An example of this: when you go to an agency, the first thing you ask is the initial investigation. Then it becomes a criminal proceeding. And then, thirdly, it's called something else. There's different names. There's different names for the procedures at the different levels of trial level and appeals level, etc. But this was for all the, but not for the citizens. Now we have a single number. We don't change the case number. So all the time, no matter what stage it's at, it's been the same thing. And so it's like going to the McDonald's. It's like, give me number one. It's like going to McDonald's. You know exactly what to order. You know what you're going to get. And so everybody's on the same page in this way. And so this is quite telling. So this is a new generation where we're using components from private sector. We're using components as well from computers and information sciences. And we're using electronic systems. And this is all contributing. And this is a bit of the methodology that we follow. In Mexico, there can't be an investigation because nobody taught us. So it's all empirical. We're learning as we go along. And when we demand somebody who's just gotten to high school to conduct an investigation, it's got to be clear. So therefore, there has to be a professionalization. There has to be training, academic training. So the investigators have to attend the university. They have to at least have a university training. So this is an aspect that we have to deal with. And now has to do with everybody's role. We've had a lot of support in this regard. This is very important. Next. Also, we have to distinguish between how much a crime costs. How much does a public prosecutor's office cost? What is the burden? How much does it cost to have a certain workload, et cetera, in an organization? So then there's a strategy here. And this, I'd like to sort of delve deeper into this for a second. We're implementing a novel approach. It's citizen customer service on this. Whether it's in Chile, Colombia, or any place I've seen throughout the region, all cases come into the Office of the Attorney General, and it's the same thing. I have to. This skateboard that was talked about, and it's the theft of something else is the same as an abduction or a kidnapping. Is all systems in Latin America says there's recidivism, common crimes. But there's no hierarchy about what's going to be solved. Here in the United States, the police decide what's going to have the priority of what has to be investigated in. So we have to engage in a deep analysis of how we choose the cases that we're going to deal with. And so just very quickly right here, we've generated an atmosphere in which we're using mediation. The context is within 2 years. 53 cases that have been brought, 53 complaints. If we bring the people together to engage in a dialogue, 80% of crimes have to do with breach of family obligations, and they're not high-impact crimes, and therefore the mediation is the solution for this. And the mediators, they can come to an agreement, and they can be solved. And we validate these with a standard of quality. This is 9,000, and so this is a business model, is what we're using, and alternative justice is alternative sentencing and justice. This is something we want to continue. And lastly, just very quick to finish up, this is what we're provide. This is shows the alternative justice system in our experience. Next, and this is what I was mentioning before: is quality management in alternative justice. Now we're talking about just like the Office of the Attorney General of the Republic, we have 23 special. So we have the legal medicine. We have more than 90 million pesos were received for laboratories and forensic medicine. I'd like to finish right now. This is something I want you to see. See, we've gone throughout the world to look at the experience. So these are conferences that we've attended in different places where we never imagined that we were going to go to. Police have been in Boise, Idaho. They've been in Rhode Island as well. We've sent people. We have ongoing training going on in terms of so we can experiment and to look at different ways of how to handle with the oral litigation and the management system so we can yield better results. This is a methodology that we're comparing with Peru, Colombia, and Chile, our efforts. We're comparing them. We're looking at indicators about temporary archiving of cases and the issue of dismissing with and without prejudice, having on a stat doc on the docket. This is a comparison between the countries. So we've started at 0 and now we're coming up, but we're not as high as Chile and Colombia. And lastly, this is the criticism of the system. With the system, there's been a lot of crimes that have come in with a change of the system. A lot of robberies came in. And so what we're doing is to work with our units, but also we're working a lot on perception. So what the reform itself gave to the police now with this reform can process the crime at the scene of the crime, can begin processing the evidence. And so we're incorporating vehicles that provide service to the citizen in real time. There's sort of a community policing with regard to this, and so through we use these cards to find where it is. A lot of times a victim will come in and file a complaint with regard to robbery and never has any contact with a prosecutor and never has any contact with the system, and this delegitimizes the system. But now they're able to keep track of it with this new system. And these are all the organizations, and I just can't thank enough Renace and CIDE and all these structures in the organization have provided moral support to all of us who are on the front lines. And boy, do we need this support, because this is not just about, we can't live only with enthusiasm, because when we think things seem lost, it's a real motivation. It really gets us going when we learn of this support and see this support. And the system is so what are the future challenges before us? The role of the quantitative goals. And I'm not just saying quantitative. I'm also talking about qualitative goals as well, because sometimes it's not just about numbers. And it's not just about the numbers. There's an Alejandro Martí sometimes, or Wallace, because of failures of the system, that things can happen. And so therefore, we have to aspire in the future to have qualitative indicators as well. And the society it doesn't understand numbers as much, but rather to understand the capacity we have available to us so that there's quality. Another thing is victim treatment with the victim. And the final things are processing of less complex cases. There's no facility in any system of the world that can handle every case that comes in. And so therefore we have to coordinate, especially for more complex cases, the TCMC, the method of investigation. We have to look at then the order and what the priorities of investigation and use of information systems, and what we have all been saying here, the relationship between the police and the prosecutor's office and recidivism. Finalmente, para mí es un placer estar aquí y agradecerles mucho a cada organización que nos ha dado la esperanza y el apoyo. Hoy en
So
México
now we have to
tenemos
fight a lot. There's a new structure, there's a new government, and all the Mexicans have the desire to do our best, really, really, as much as we can, and we are going to fight the war. Which is the war? The credibility of the society. Thank you very much.
I think maybe that buzzing was that our 2:30 time limit had reached, but please, we have just a few more minutes. If people have questions, comments they want to make, I don't want to rush everyone out. Please raise your hand, and we'll take those briefly. Just a few more minutes. Yes. The lights are playing trick on my eyes, but is that Diana Negroponte? Sorry, thank you.
I wanted to ask you, as well as the other panelists from this morning, how useful the surveys carried out by Latino Barometro on the trust that citizens have in their judiciary. Latino Barometro has been doing this now for 7 years, so we've got a good database, we've got a good base system. How useful are they?
Anyone else? Anybody in Mexico City?
Yeah, well, that's right, for the assessment.
What do you make of this issue of the trust in the authorities? Or
Bueno, yo no estoy muy enfocado en este proceso, pero lo que yo sí puedo decir es que cualquier propuesta de análisis es muy relevante. Nosotros trabajamos en línea con el Instituto Transfronterizo, con David Chirk, con Octavio, que está de la mano con nosotros en San Diego. Ellos tienen una cantidad de programas que tienen que ver con medición y somos monitoreados por este tipo de institutos. Me parece que cualquier propuesta institucional que tenga esa visión es un elemento que te da finalmente un indicador. Creo que se requiere, lo que acaban de decir, mucha transparencia, pero también es un poco impulsar a las personas, sobre todo a los operadores, para que no sientan el miedo de que cuando van a dar la información están inmediatamente juzgados. Y esto tiene que ver con el Poder Judicial, con el Poder Ejecutivo y con el Poder Legislativo. Es decir, cada vez que en México hay esta especie de dinámica de información, hay una resistencia a no darla. Por lo tanto, creo que es un tema cultural que se tiene que sensibilizar. Sobre todo las organizaciones pueden hacer un trabajo de lobby extraordinario que nos puede apoyar a sentirnos en confianza. Porque ahora, lamentablemente, mucho de lo que ha sucedido es que han emergido una cantidad de asociaciones independientes y públicas que todo el mundo mide todo. Y entonces sucede que nos vamos al extremo entonces de que todo está mal, y me parece que no todo está mal. Y yo rescataría que entonces tenemos que revisar la perspectiva de que algo está funcionando, porque entonces creo que eso le da confianza y certeza a Seguridad y Justicia en México de que va caminando independientemente de los planes que tengamos a corto, mediano y largo plazo.
any other comments in Mexico City or here? All right, I'm reminded of a statistic that's used various ways, but that somewhere between 94 and 97% of all crime in Mexico is local. And it reminds me of the the real importance of this initiative, the reform movement, what Licenciado Moreno is trying to carry out in Baja California, that at some real fundamental level, the struggle for against crime and violence in Mexico is a local struggle. And that's got to be a real important priority for the Mexicans, obviously, but whatever it is the U.S. does to support that effort, it's also wise that it be focused in that direction. That's why I'm delighted that the U.S. state attorney generals are also involved in that way. Thank you all for your patience and hanging in there and listening to us and raising your questions. Thank you to the folks in Mexico City for listening in. Thank you for the technical people that helped arrange all these newfangled ways of being in touch and communicating. We are delighted that you were with us throughout the day, and thank you again, and welcome. You're welcome back anytime. Thank you.